We're back and the defense is ready and state's ready, so we will proceed. Ms. Mull.
Randy McDaniel.
Randy McDaniel. Right up here, sir. Raise your right hand.
You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please put your hand up. Ms. McDaniel, if you would state your name for the court and spell it.
Randy Eugene McDaniel,
And spell it.
RandyEugene McDaniel.
I'm very few questions for you. First of all, what is your relationship to Joseph and Jennifer Rosenbaum?
Brother-in-law,
Your brother-in-law to whom?
Joseph.
And what is your relationship to Jennifer McDaniel?
That's my wife.
I want to take you back to November 17th of 2015. Do you recall that night?
I do.
Where did you spend the evening that night?
We started off at Sam's Club because we were shopping for the next day, and my wife, well, girlfriend at the time, got a phone call and we rushed up to the hospital.
And when you got to the hospital, what did you find?
Mother-in-law, she was upset and crying. Jennifer was upset in the corner. She was crying, and she had been crying. Her face was all red, and Joseph was pretty much the same way.
And what day is that?
He was physically upset, and he was shaking to himself. You could see his hands and arms shaking. I do remember that.
Did you know the girls, Layla?
A little bit. I didn't really spend that much time with them, but a little bit, yeah.
I have no further, Mr. McDaniel.
Okay. Andrew.
Ms. McNeill, who was in the room besides your family members when you were at the hospital on the 7th?
I know there was just us four, and then later on a caseworker come in, or social worker, whichever they're called. She brought the oldest one in there, and then I guess coroner and a police officer come in there.
At what point did you learn that Layla had died?
We knew that she was choking or had choked, but that's all we knew on the way up there. Didn't find that out until later on. It was a little bit before the coroner stuff come in there.
So a little bit before the coroners came in, Samantha White came in and told y'all that Layla was dead.
I don't know who Samantha White is.
The caseworker or case manager came in and told y'all that Layla had died.
She had come in right before, but no, she never mentioned that.
So who are you saying told you that Layla was dead?
That's the doctor or somebody come in there.
So that's the first time that y'all heard that Layla
That first time I heard about it, yes ma'am.
had died. Do you know if anybody else had come in and spoken to Jennifer before you got there?
Not that I'm aware of.
And when you got there, who was in the room?
Mary, Jen and Joseph, and my girlfriend, my wife.
And then you came later.
So we came together, me and my wife came.
You and your wife and girlfriend at the
Yes,
time?
yes ma'am.
Okay. So you can't say who came in and out of the room before you got there.
No ma'am.
You only know who came in and what they said when you were there.
Yes ma'am.
When you got there, were the defendants upset as you described?
You could physically see that because you can see it on their face and everything.
But at that point, you did not know that Layla was dead.
No ma'am.
And you don't believe that they knew Layla was dead, or you don't know?
I don't know.
Nothing.
Thank you, sir. You can step down and you're excused. Yes, there's no objection.
No, that's it.
You can just not remove this. right up here. Raise your right hand.
So what we got?
Yes.
Would you have them have a seat? Would you please state your name for the record and spell it?
Cynthia McNeill, Cynthia McNeill.
Ms. McNeil, do you know the Rosenbaums?
Yes,
How do you know them?
through political events and meetings.
And you've owned a daycare, is that correct?
Yes.
And how long have you owned a daycare?
I owned it for 15 and a half years, and I just recently sold it in the 1st of July.
So you're retired now?
Yeah.
And were you active in the daycare? Were you there on a daily basis, taking care of kids?
Pretty much, yes.
Tell me, did you ever get to meet the foster children of Jennifer and Joseph Rosenbaum?
Yes.
And tell me on what occasions you met the girls.
During some of our meetings, and then also sometimes after the meetings, we would go have coffee or dessert or maybe even dinner.
And how did the children react towards you?
They were friendly and, sweet little girls.
Did they act as if they were afraid of Jennifer?
No.
Did you ever see them with Joseph or just with Jennifer?
Joseph may have been at like coffee or something like that.
How did Jennifer act around the children?
Seemed to be very caring and, paying attention to them.
And did you see Joseph interact with them?
I don't recall.
Did you see them under any other circumstances besides the meetings?
Just in the restaurants that we would go to after the meetings.
And would the girls go with you too?
Yes.
And would they eat?
Yes.
Anything about that that was unusual?
No, ma'am.
Did you see any bruises, cuts, or lacerations on the girls?
No.
And did the girls ever favor their arms?
No.
Did they ever tell you that something hurt?
No.
Did they ever report any child abuse to you?
No, no.
Do you have an idea of when it is that what the dates are that you saw the girls?
I'm not really sure. I think it was like on October and November, maybe.
October and November of 2015?
Yes, ma'am.
Would that have been for the monthly meetings?
Yes.
Would it help you to look at some documents to determine the exact date?
Maybe.
See if these documents help refresh your recollection as to when you saw the girls.
I'm sure it was the October the 13th meeting.
Any other dates?
Well, this is the Republican women, but we were also part of the Republican, the regular GOP, which met the Tuesday before this. So it would have been maybe October the 6th, and then so it was during that month, and we had several events and things that we were raising money and having different candidates and things speak.
Did you see them at all in November 2014 at the monthly meeting?
I'm not sure.
Those don't refresh your recollection?
Well, we had a lot going on, but it was during that whole period of time.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. McNeill.
Right.
So your recollection, as far as you know, is the last time you saw the girls would have been October the 13th.
That's the last I remember, but it could have been even in November.
But you don't have any independent recollection.
No,
Let me ask you, did you ever see the littlest one, Layla, with a cast on?
no,
Okay. So she had a cast on up until November the 13th, then you didn't see her during that period of time.
no.
So let's talk about October the 13th, since that's the day that you recall. Where were you at when you saw the girls?
At the Southern Cooking restaurant.
At the restaurant. And were the girls clothed?
Yes,
And so when you talk about not seeing any marks or injuries to them, you're talking about the parts of their bodies that you could see.
correct.
So you couldn't see their stomachs,
Nope,
their backs,
no,
their buttocks,
no,
their hips,
no,
their vaginal areas.
of course not.
So you wouldn't know whether or not they had injuries on those parts of their bodies.
Correct.
And do they appear to be able to utilize their limbs, their arms, and their legs?
Yes,
And they seemed happy to you.
yes.
Were they rough and tumble or rambunctious during the times that you would see them?
No.
How would you describe them?
Being very respectful and sitting quietly and sitting on Jennifer's lap and sitting next to her.
Outside of Jennifer, did the children know anyone else at the meetings?
They don't know anyone that I could tell.
You never went and visited the Rosenbaums at their home?
No,
Never rode in a car with them with the girls?
no,
So all your interactions were out in public?
yes,
And you own a daycare?
yes.
What's the name of that daycare?
Mount Zion Child Care?
Were the children ever enrolled in your daycare?
No,
Nothing fun.
Thank you. For your
Do
reference.
you recall whether the children were at the meeting where Sheriff Grayer spoke?
I do recall that, yes,
Were they there?
yes.
And was that meeting in November?
I don't know when it was. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. You can step down. Any objections, witness being excused? And you're free to go. Bench will call its next witness.
Call Tina Flowers.
Tina Flowers.
Would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
You take a seat, and if you can, state your name for the record and spell.
Yes. Tina Flowers, Tinaflowers.
Ms. Flowers, what is your occupation?
Currently I'm a licensing specialist at Bloom Our Youth.
And what is Bloom Our Youth?
It is a private foster care agency in Fayetteville, Georgia.
What is a private foster care facility?
Our agency is licensed with the state of Georgia to bring foster children into our homes that we've licensed, foster homes that we licensed through the state of Georgia, but they're with our agency.
It's a private agency.
Yes, ma'am.
Why would somebody go through the private agency as opposed to going through the state of Georgia?
It is just really a preference. It's their choice. They still have to follow the same type of requirements, but with a private agency, they just have a little more support. It's just really a preference of the person that's deciding to foster.
Okay. What is the relevance of this witness's testimony?
This witness's testimony is going to testify as to Millie Place.
Okay. And is there anything else that you wish to share about that? Is there a time frame?
It is, there's a time frame that is, what years were you involved in Millie Place?
Millie was placed with our agency in December of 2018, and I was her case manager, her social worker through Bloom from that time, from December through the end of June of 2018.
Why don't we approach? Please continue.
Thank you. What was the basic problem with Millie Place with regards to?
Go ahead and finish your question.
What was the basic problem with Millie Place with regards to Ms. Harrell and her transition into the home?
Well, I would say in regards to her permanency, in regards to the foster parent that was at the time Ms. Harrell, we started transitional visits for Millie to come to her home probably maybe 6 months prior to her actually being placed in Ms. Harrell's home. And so we were preparing for her to come to the home in regards to the adoption. So I wouldn't say that there were necessarily behaviors that we were working towards before the placement, but she was starting to do transitions into the home because they were considering Ms. Harrell her adoptive resource. And then when she got into the home, she continued with counseling that she was already receiving, just to help her with that transition, with preparing for her to be adopted by Ms. Harrell. But to say that there were specific behavior problems that she was dealing with other than just getting her acclimated to the home, Millie may have questioned whether Amanda was going to be her permanent mom, but we didn't have any real behaviors that we were working on that were substantial to her not being able to have normalcy, I would say. Yeah, I would say yes. I would not say that it was a problem where Miss Amanda could not correct that, but I would say that she would have stories that she would tell, and they may have been, for her age, that it might have been fabricated some.
Did Miss Amanda Harrell, and Miss Amanda Harrell is the lady that eventually adopted?
Yes, yes, ma'am.
And her two sisters.
That's correct.
And did Miss Harrell ever express any concern about not knowing whether Millie was telling something that was truthful versus something that was fictional?
Yes, there would be times that Millie may tell a story or say something, and we would question it because of the time frame or who she was referencing, but it was concerning, and we talked about it, and it was probably addressed during counseling, but it was not a behavior where we thought that it was detrimental. It was something that we needed to correct, and it kind of just addressed with Millie, but it wasn't something to the point where we thought she needed to seek counseling because she couldn't because she was only 6 at the time, she was getting stories confused. So it was not a huge concern, but it was something that we did talk about, yes.
And she was getting counseling.
Yes, that is correct.
And did Amanda tell you anything with regards to Millie embellishing stories?
I cannot recall specifics, but I do know that she had mentioned when I would visit with her in the home that sometimes when they would be talking, Millie, it would be confusing because Millie would tell stories and we would not be sure what was truth and fiction. So yes, I would say it happened, but I would not say it was overwhelmingly concerning because she was able, we recognize that because of her situation and her age, the stories, some of them were fabricated.
Did Ms. Harrell admit, though, that you said you're not sure of the specifics?
Yes, I don't remember specific stories, yes.
Would it help you to look at a document?
Okay, maybe.
Does this help you with specifics?
It doesn't help me with specifics, it just makes me, I just know that this is a note that I wrote, but it doesn't give specifics because there's not specifics in this particular note that I could talk to.
Does it answer the question of what Ms. Harrell admitted to you?
It answers the question that, yes, this helps me to recall that Amanda admits that Millie was telling stories, yes.
Was telling stories and what else?
Embellishing the truth. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Was there any concern about Peggy Banks?
There were no concerns in regards to Ms. Banks regarding the safety of Millie. They were concerned that because we were transitioning Millie into her permanent home, that it would be confusing for Millie just because she was still continuing that ongoing contact with Ms. Banks. It wasn't a concern, Ms. Banks was not a concern in regards to like safety or security or anything like that. It was just a concern that how would Millie do with continuing, because she continued ongoing contact, as far as I know, up until after the termination of parental rights. And so our concern was always how would that look like with after Millie was adopted with Ms. Banks and having that contact. But we didn't have concerns with her in particular regarding the safety of Millie, no.
I understand the safety, but did you have concerns with her about what Peggy tells Millie and the appropriateness thereof?
Mm-hmm. Because we just didn't know, we knew that it could be confusing with Ms. Banks still wanting to keep that contact and Millie being adopted by another family. So that we knew that, not maybe intentionally, but Ms. Banks, we were concerned that because we were in that transition time, that Ms. Banks may say something that was more confusing for Millie regarding her being permanently with Amanda.
Was in the process of doing that, was there concern about Ms. Banks' interactions with Millie?
I would say there was always concern that maybe she would say something inappropriately to Millie about circumstances, yes. I cannot say that she necessarily did that I can recall, but we did have that concern because she would often talk openly with Amanda, and so we were concerned that she may openly talk that same way with Millie.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting.
Just to clarify, what were the dates when you were involved with Millie's case?
Millie came to Bloom December 27th, so that is of December 27th of 2018. So that is when I became her social worker, and I moved into my new position with Bloom at the very beginning of December of 2017 is when Millie came to us. I moved out of my position working with Amanda and Millie in July of 2018.
And you would agree with me that calling out children make up stories, that's not unusual.
Right, I agree.
And you did say that the behavior that Millie was exhibiting was detrimental?
Not to her placement.
And what were concerns that Amanda may have had as to what Millie was saying? That doesn't mean that the things Millie was saying weren't true.
Correct. We knew that it seemed like it was embellished because we didn't know if timelines didn't, sometimes timelines didn't line up, or who was she referring to would be, or for a 6-year-old, that circumstance, not sure. So it was those kind of circumstances. It wasn't that we were concerned about her safety. We were just, she's talking about that, and I'm not sure if that's right. That couldn't have happened. She couldn't have done that. It was that kind of thing. So we knew that she was embellishing, but we didn't see it as a real behavior issue or problem. It was one of those things you could address immediately. That doesn't sound right, Millie. Are you telling us the truth?
And you're also aware that 6-year-old children aren't really good with dates and times.
Exactly. I agree.
So a child will get a date versus a time confused isn't unusual.
Correct. Not in the circumstances with Millie and those talks that we were having.
And the things that you were concerned about regarding Peggy Banks as to what she was saying, what were those about?
Because we were moving towards adoption, our communication with Millie was now that Amanda was going to be her forever mom. And so we were just concerned when she was having her time with Miss Peggy that was not what was being reaffirmed.
So these concerns about what Ms. Banks may or may not have been telling Millie had nothing to do with Jennifer and Joseph Rosenbaum.
No.
And these concerns about maybe truth or fiction or embellishing, that didn't have anything to do with the Rosenbaums either, did it?
I can't remember any particulars that was reported to me about Millie talking about the Rosenbaums, no.
And of course, you wouldn't know, you don't know what happened.
No, I don't.
Thank you. No further questions.
Did Ms. Amanda tell you that Millie will tell lies, so you have to decipher between truth and fiction? You have to be careful in deciphering.
I don't remember that particular conversation, but I could say in general that was a conversation because we did discuss if Millie was embellishing stuff. So I can't say particularly that, yes, that was a conversation we had, but in general we did speak of that.
See if this refreshes your recollection.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, yes.
What?
It says here that in my note, foster parent reports that Millie is doing well and that she recognizes that Millie will tell lies, so that you have to carefully decipher what is real and correct with Millie.
And did she not also have a conversation with you where she told you that it was difficult to determine fact or fiction?
Is that, I don't know what.
Can you ask it again?
Did you have a conversation with Miss Amanda Harrell where she said that Millie will tell stories or embellish the truth such that you don't know whether it's fact or fiction?
Yes.
Thank you.
And as far as you know, Amanda had just met Millie. Millie was approximately 6
Yes.
So she really didn't know about Millie's past.
Not in detail, no ma'am.
So she wouldn't know if things were fact or fiction. I had some problem trying to figure that out. Is that accurate?
Right.
And that's not unusual for a foster.
No, that's not unusual.
Thank you. That's a good question.
Anything else for this witness? Thank you, ma'am. You can step down. Okay. And you're excused.
Thank you.
Unless there's an objection.
Call Dr. Powell to the stand.
Dr. Powell?
Dr. Powell. Raise your hand. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
If you would have a seat and give us your full name and title and spell it for us.
Okay. My name is James Lee Powell. I'm a licensed psychologist, licensed in the state of Georgia. Powell is spelled Powell.
Dr. Powell, can you tell us what your educational background is?
I have an undergraduate degree in religion from Duke University. I have a Master's of Divinity magna cum laude from Duke Divinity School. I have a PhD in clinical community psychology from North Carolina State University at Raleigh.
Dr. Powell, have you been qualified as are you a licensed psychologist?
That's correct.
And how long have you been licensed in the state of Georgia?
Since 1985.
Are you licensed in the house?
No.
Have you testified in the courts of Georgia?
Yes, I have.
And have you been qualified as an expert in those courts?
Yes, I have.
And how many times have you been qualified, would you say, roundabout?
Total cases or
Total cases?
total cases approaching 200.
Have you written any materials or articles in your field?
Yes, I have.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I've made a number of presentations at professional associations, national conventions, and all that, a large number of those around religion and psychology and around child molestation cases. I've published written articles, did a series of short articles for a regional newspaper focused on United Methodist Church around psychological issues for rural membership churches. One of my articles was published in a training kit for the United Methodist Church in doing disaster relief and was used internationally, actually. I published an article on sexual traps, why some get snared in Ministries Magazine. An article on fundamentalist family whose son had AIDS, and a book on Christian counseling, psychotherapy of fundamentalist clients, enhancing mental health of rural clergy, and avoiding contamination and child sexual abuse interviewing, and that was in the Georgia Bar Association newsletter, criminal law section.
Are you familiar with the topic of child abuse and child molestation?
Yes, I am.
At this time, Your Honor, I would ask to qualify Dr. Powell as an expert in his field, in the field of psychology and child abuse.
Your Honor, I haven't heard anything about child abuse except for one article. I've heard a lot about the ministry and the clergy. The training or experience of child abuse.
Have you had training or experience in the field of child abuse?
Yes, I have. I've attended a number of sexual abuse training workshops going back to 1978 in Madison, Wisconsin, at the University of Wisconsin, and various other workshops. I somewhere I was at in my vita, and I've testified in a number of cases in child molestation. I've supervised and taught about child molestation at the graduate school level. And I presented at a number of conferences on child molestation papers.
Have you done any studies on the contamination of children's memories and the veracity of children?
Right, that's what my article was for the Georgia Bar Association.
At this time, I think the qualified as an expert in psychological field and the field specifically of child abuse as it relates to psychology.
Would you like to further what out with this?
Yes, please.
All right.
Good afternoon, Dr. Powell.
Good day.
I could understand your testimony earlier, you got a BA or you got a degree in religion,
That's correct.
and then you got a master's in divinity,
That's correct.
and your dissertation was in intergenerational learning of assertive and aggressive behaviors in rural Appalachian families.
That was in my PhD program at NC State, yes.
And according to your CV, you discuss or have written or done work with rural Appalachia about 8 times. You refer to that 8 times.
In articles that and papers we presented, yes.
And also in your CV, you refer to things involving religion and the church 39 times. Is that accurate?
And maybe I hadn't categorized it that way.
And is there anywhere in your CV where the term physical abuse is listed?
I presented at the Georgia Indigent Defense Council seminar in 1998 on psychological issues in defending cases of alleged crimes against children, and that would include physical abuse. I talked about interviewing in child molestation. I taught a graduate course at Georgia School of Professional Psychology on doing interviewing in those cases. My papers frequently were around sexual abuse or physical abuse.
Is it actually true that the presentation at the Georgia Indigent Defense Council was defending a child molestation case?
Yes.
Okay, so it's specific to child molestation?
It was talking about the evidence that a psychologist could present and talk about in this kind of case.
And as well as the other Indigent Defense Council referral was also how to try a child molestation case.
Yes.
So nowhere in your CV do you address anything having to do with physical abuse?
Well, those presentations included physical abuse. No, I have not written an article strictly on physical abuse, nor have I presented that would be exclusive from sexual abuse, but it's abuse to children.
And have you ever looked at a CAC?
Child Advocacy Center interview? Yeah.
You worked at a child advocacy?
No, I have not worked at one. I've seen their interviews, yes.
You've seen their interviews, but you've never done. Is that correct?
No, I do interviews.
I understand, but you do forensic interview. Have you done forensic interview at a child advocacy center?
Not at a Child Advocacy Center. That's a different type of category.
And so we talked about those 2 presentations at Defense Council seminars, and out of all of that, out of your entire, I believe it's 10-page CV, that's 2 presentations you've had.
Well, I did one for the Christian Association of Psychological Studies meeting at Ridgeview Hospital, and then I did, let's see,
That was a
Good.
effective interviewing child abuse.
right, that's what the title was, Effective Interviewing in Child Abuse. And then I've taught interviewing in child abuse situations and to doctoral students. And I've supervised students for many, many years in their practicums, and part of that includes child abuse.
The interviewing though, it wasn't forensic.
Not, that's the practicum work they were doing and treating of children in therapy. That's correct.
Okay, but I mean, it wasn't, you weren't teaching forensic interviewing.
I have taught forensic interviewing for Georgia School of Professional Psychology.
They were probably just mixing up what you're talking about in terms of forensic interviewing. When I'm talking about forensic interviewing, I'm talking about the Child Advocacy Center.
Child Advocacy Center is only one type of protocol. It's only one type of place where forensic interviewing is done. Not all states use child advocacy centers, and certainly other people do it besides child advocacy centers.
I know, but I was just trying to clarify, make sure that we're talking about the same thing.
Right, okay.
Thank you. Still stand on my objection.
All right. Okay, tell me the general topics of this
The
testimony.
general topic would be interviewing techniques of children.
He's accepted by the court as an expert in that area.
Dr. Powell, have you had occasion to review other people's forensic interviews?
Yes, I have.
About how many times have you done that?
I've probably looked at well in excess of 200 forensic interviews.
And do you do forensic interviews yourself?
Yes,
Do you do forensic interviews of children who claim to be molested or abused?
correct. Yes, I do.
And were you asked to take a look at some interviews, some forensic interviews in this case?
Yes, I did.
And if you would tell us what it is that you reviewed.
I reviewed some discovery material, the police reports, the Child Advocacy Center write-ups on the interviews they did, and I reviewed 4 interviews, not all of which are in this case, but somewhat related to this case.
With regards, Dr. Powell, to forensic interviewing, is that done in the private sector as well as in the child advocacy centers?
Yes, it is.
Is there anything that is formalized about the child advocacy centers that can't be repeated in private practice?
Not that's formalized. Every county in Georgia, all 159 counties, have a protocol of how do you treat allegations of abuse, particularly sexual abuse, and it tells who in that county is the approved one for doing it for the legal system. And so child advocacy centers are the frequent ones doing that, but I've still been asked to do second opinions, and I've been asked for children that were potential victims and had not been interviewed to do a forensic interview of them. And I've also been asked a couple of times by DFACS, because they were backed up, to do a forensic interview.
And what is important, tell us, what is it about a forensic interview that is so important and so different than any other interview?
As psychologists, particularly child psychologists, we're taught to believe the children, to affirm them, to give a warm, embracing environment so that children feel safe to talk and deal with their psychological issues. Forensic interviewing is somewhat different. In a forensic interview, you don't believe the child, you don't disbelieve the child. You're neutral. And you go into the situation and you look at, as you listen to the child, factors that would support or not support the likelihood that what's being alleged happened. And so you use a set of techniques, not directive, to make sure you can find out what the child really believes themselves, not what has been coached, not what has been told of them, but what they have experienced. And When there's question marks, you use hypothesis testing.
What is a hypothesis testing?
Hypothesis testing is working to rule in or rule out certain factors. So if a child says, he sexed me, which is not what happened in this case, but I've had that in a lot of cases. I don't know what that means, so I say, tell me more. Very simple, just tell me more and make sure that I know that their 4-year, 5, 6-year-old mind is saying the same thing that my adult mind interprets with that.
Can a child of 4 years old be coached?
Children of any age can be coached. Coaching is merely learning what somebody else tells you. I can coach a dog to sit down when I say sit if I use a little doggy biscuit and give them enough and practice enough times. All people can be coached, all people can be influenced, and what you want to do is to find out if there's any influencing that's been done in the situation that you're doing the forensic interview on.
With regards to children being coached, what is that? What is the analogy to coaching? What is that actually doing to 4-year-olds?
It's convincing them that something happened, and we know that children learn, and that's what we're really talking about. Coaching is a type of teaching. Sometimes it's done intentionally, and we've got to watch that in divorce cases, where there's even a phenomenon called sexual abuse in divorce, where there's an allegation that a child's being coached so that one parent gets a better deal out of the divorce. But it can also be done indirectly, where a parent angry at somebody else, or somebody else angry at somebody in the child's life, says negative things, the child overhears, and that becomes an indirect form of coaching, and they begin to incorporate the anger toward that individual.
Did you see any of that in the interviews of Millie Place?
I have some concern of things that I don't understand between the interview done previous to the last interview, the third interview, and the fourth interview, where in one,
Okay, so long as that's the nature of the question, objections are ruled.
okay, and the third interview, the child's very positive toward Miss Jennifer. In the fourth interview, she paints a very dire picture of Miss Jennifer. Between the third and the fourth interview, she hasn't seen Miss Jennifer, and the question is, what's happened? And hypothesis testing should have been done to find out. And there are a whole range of possibilities, but what is likely to happen might be available from the child directly had hypothesis testing been done.
Let's talk about that last interview with the two detectives.
Yes.
Can you tell me what were your concerns, if any, about that interview?
I have a number of concerns about that interview. It starts in a very crowded room. Forensic interviewing is normally one child, one interviewer. And here we've got two officers, people of high value, officers who are generally seen by kids as pretty powerful people. And we know that high value people tend to have a major influence on what children say. So we've got that, then we've got a foster mother in there, and we've got a couple of other voices, and I'm not sure how many people are in the room, because we've got a picture only of the child, not of the forensic setting for the interviewing, not of the forensic interviewers. It's a confusing situation.
Why is it important to have a view of the questioner as well as a view of the person being questioned?
One of the things that the courts have made clear that's important in forensic interviewing in court cases is that you look at the interview techniques. And that's the thing that I've been testifying about in most of these cases. And one interview technique is the interviewer. the nonverbals, the verbals. Part of the interview technique is what you say and what you do. 55% of what we get when we talk to somebody is nonverbal, and that's what we miss on the telephone. You may notice on the telephone you don't feel quite as comfortable because you don't see the face unless you've got videos now, the video phone. But the nonverbal is 55% of what we interpret. So if we say, "You'll really like this," you know, you've got two hints. One, my tone of voice, the other, my face, versus "you'll really like this," which is an entirely different message. So we don't see the face, we don't see the nonverbals, we don't see the eye expression, we don't see the lips, and that would have been helpful in knowing a little bit more. 38% of what we get in the communication is the tone of voice, and only 7% of the actual words themselves. So that's why it's important to preserve that record in the video, and that was missing in this case.
Tell me if you had any concern about having another child in the room with the one being questioned.
Yes, I do, because you want to get what the child knows, remembers, and has experienced, and not people say this, talk about this, do this, because there's somebody sort of coaching them from the sidelines. And we've got that in this interview, and that's unfortunate. Would it make any difference? I don't know. But we don't know whether it'd make any difference, and that's the problem. So you don't want other people in there, and it's just unfortunate that it was done this way when they had some other options.
What about leading questions? Is that a problem in child interview?
Very clearly, that's a problem, because if you do leading questions, you're giving the child a hint as to what the answer is. With high-value people, an officer, a defects worker, somebody that the child knows is important, they've got to be extra careful, because the child's going to pick up on what they want and give it to them. That makes school teaching better, because school teachers know that, and they sort of hint to the kids what they need to be saying, learning, doing. But that's not what we're doing in forensic interviewing. We want the child to say what they have directly experienced and know.
If a child of 4 could not be coached, what would that say about our pre-K system and our kindergarten system?
We'd have to close it down and save taxpayers a lot of money, because if they can't be coached, they can't be taught, they can't learn, and we're wasting time trying to teach them. That's absurd. We all can be taught. I used to work in a mental retardation facility where we had people with IQs of 8 who couldn't even talk. They didn't have enough IQ. And we were able to teach them. We were able to teach them skills that they needed for living. All living creatures can be taught.
Let me ask you a hypothetical. If you knew that a child's biological great-grandmother and mother were known to be talking to the child about either what to say or about what happened in the case or their view of what happened, would you be concerned that that child might repeat what the mother or great-grandmother was telling?
This child loves her mother a great deal, and in all the interviews, she's talking about looking forward to going back to living with her mother. Her family is very, very important to her. She's closely bonded to this family, and she's likely to pick up on what they say and incorporate it. And we don't know what they talked about. The only question that was raised was one real quickly: did anybody tell you today or what to say today? And she said no, which may be true, but what has people been talking about in the days up to today? What do you believe about this? And where did you get some of the words you're talking about today? Because that didn't exist a few weeks before. So this is important information, and it could have been gleaned, but they never did the right techniques.
Hypothetically, hypothetically speaking, if you knew that a child's biological mother had been talking about the Rosenbaums to the child and had to be asked by DFACS to stop talking about the Rosenbaums to the child, would that give you any concern about the child being able to understand?
Yes.
Explain why.
If people you value, people you love, people that are important to you, people that have always been part of your life are telling you certain things, you're likely to believe that. And whether it was good things or bad things, I don't know, but it's likely to be incorporated by the child.
Talk to us at all, talk to us if you would about contamination of the interview. What does that mean?
Contamination of an interview refers to anything that can come in that changes the belief or thought of the child about the event at hand. Seeing a Jerry Springer show for a child that's been molested may well change the allegation of molestation, though it was clearly true, but it now incorporates some of the other because you've got a contaminating factor, something that may cause blending of memories, or there are any number of factors. There are a lot of things that can contaminate an interview. The passage of time, people talking about it, anger you have, a friend at school telling their story. All these are things that can influence and contaminate an interview.
Why is it that it is important, if it is important, to get the child fresh to the forensic interviewer? Why is it important for that to be the case?
There are fewer chances to get contaminated, to have contamination occur. The sooner after the allegation the child is there, the fewer people they've talked to, not having interviews, these are important things. And DFACS will frequently say, when there's been one of these cases, don't talk to your child about anything till after the forensic interview.
The last interview that you saw, did you hear the child say, sort of in surprise, haven't you watched the news?
Yes.
And what does that say to you?
I was struck by that when I heard the child say that, because what she's doing is saying, I believe the news. This is not a fake news child. This is a young child. This is a child who believes what she hears in the news, and whatever she heard in the news, she believes. And I saw the news report, but it's been a while, and I don't remember all the details, and I'm not going to speculate what she believed out of that. It should have been explored.
And can it be explored in a forensic interview?
Yes, that's part of hypothesis testing. Tell me what you saw on the news. That might have been a really interesting question, but nobody did that.
With regards to having two detectives peppering her with questions, did you have any concern about that?
Yes, anytime you get 2-on-1, you're sort of overwhelmed. I think most of us would rather talk with one person than two people. Two people are more likely to carry influence, and you feel more coerced.
Did you see evidence of leading in those interviews, in the last interview?
There was some evidence of directive leading of, she said her arm was twisted, and then they don't say, tell me more, they say, how many times? You know, that's more directive. They could have done it more neutrally by saying, tell me more. They go on to do a lot of joking with her, what's called co-opting, trying to get her identifying with them in a playful way so that they will follow more of what they are saying.
Tell me why that is inappropriate, if that's inappropriate.
Co-opting. Co-opting in an interview is sort of the same thing we talk about with a child molester doing grooming, getting the child on their side. We know that grooming is a really bad thing because it often precedes getting the child to trust you enough to molest them. co-opting is a way of getting the child to fall into your camp, and things you say may be more likely to be validated by them whether they believe it or not.
Why is joking the same thing as rapport building?
No. This is a very serious matter. This is a horrible case. It's a death, young child. Horrible situation. What you want is the truth. And nowhere did they say, we want you just to tell us the truth about what you experienced, what you actually saw. Instead, they joke and play and then ask.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
What is the risk, what is the message the child gets if you start out joking and laughing?
You fear that they see it as a playful event. Children are really good at creativity and fantasy, and what you want is not fantasy, you want fact. You don't want what somebody else told you or what you saw on a TV show. You want what you actually experienced. And you want it clear that that's your experience and not a blending of memories with another experience that you did have.
If you have a child that gets a lot of her information from an adult that she loves, say a great-grandmother, is there any risk to reliability as to what she's going to say?
Well, kids tend to believe the grown-ups in their lives. If they didn't, most of us who are parents would have not survived. You want them to believe what you say. You want them to follow what you say. And that's great for children, but it may not be great for getting at the accuracy of what the child saw in a foster home.
Can children be influenced by what they hear adults say?
All the time, yes.
And can they then blend it into their story and make it as part of their own story?
Yes.
Is this a malicious thing or is it an unconscious thing? Which is it?
The answer is depends. In some situations, it's unconscious. People don't mean to be influencing a child. In the Old South, we saw that a lot with a person's fear of somebody of an ethnic minority, and they would get sweaty hands walking down the sidewalk with a child. The child would get the message. This is somebody sort of scary, and they would begin to develop racism. Sometimes it's intentional, as it might be in a divorce case where they're trying to get a better deal, so they're trying to get the negative statements of the child against the other parent. But it varies. But the problem is, it happens. And what you want to do is find out why it's happening, what's going on, and as accurately as possible, the truth.
If a child has a problem with telling the truth, if a child lies, albeit about small things, does that concern you in any way for the veracity of what she is going to say in a forensic interview?
Obviously, that is an issue, and obviously that's a concern, and that's why hypothesis testing, developmentally sensitive interviewing, doing this correctly, trying to get at the truth is so important.
What happens when kids are subjected to the same questioning over and over despite the answers they may give?
Multiple questioning on the same thing is something that's sort of a no-no in forensic interviewing, because when that happened to you in school, what did that mean? The teacher asked you the same question a third time. It meant your first answer wasn't right, and you better change it. And that's what is the risk, that the answer, rather than getting at the truth finally, is you're changing it to please the teacher or the person in authority or the interviewer.
What is the difference between being a child advocate and a forensic interviewer?
It may not be anything.
It may not be any. maybe one and the same person.
Right. I like to think of myself as a child advocate. I like to think of myself as a forensic interviewer because I do those things, but I don't work at a child advocacy center doing forensic interviews.
What about the use of coloring books, Play-Doh, playthings? How does that affect a forensic interview?
Giving a child Play-Doh or having them color is getting another task off target for them to do while you're trying to get them to focus on target. We can't do two things at one time. Our mind switches back and forth between the two. Can you imagine being in a math class and your math teacher giving all of you Play-Doh to make a little play turtle while she tries to teach you the multiplication tables? People in my class who were scratching and drawing got their papers taken away and sometimes were sent to the principal's office. This doesn't work. This detracts from the learning process and the disclosure process. So this, while I understand the intention, it's not a good technique. And researchers have demonstrated that by doing research of kids doing this while they're doing disclosure and then not. And Michael Lamb is one of the people who did research on that.
And what has his research shown?
Well, you're better off not using that. And in his guidelines for doing forensic interviewing, he says don't use coloring books and clay. I actually was with him in a workshop and talked with him one-on-one, and he said, I've never done that, and I've never had trouble getting a child disclosed.
With regards to the pool study, the Pool and Lamb study,
Yes,
are you familiar with that?
yes.
Can you tell us what their position is on how children should be interviewed?
Yes, they had a major federal grant for over a several-year period, and they published it in the book Investigative Interviews of Children. And what they did was to do good scientific research on how to do correct interviewing, what the effects of different types of approaches are and different variables are. And they are very strong advocates of letting the child freely disclose as opposed to leading them, finding out what the child has experienced and letting them do that as freely as you can. And the protocol for the state of Michigan, and you can Google that, for doing child sexual abuse interviewing is their type of approach. And in fact, Deborah Poole, one of the two investigators, wrote that protocol. And that's what I personally use in doing interviewing.
Is that used in the state of Georgia's child advocacy centers?
No.
Dr. Powell, what, if anything, if you could sum up for us, what is your concern about that fourth interview?
The fourth interview had a lot of changes from the third interview to the fourth interview. There's a whole different set of allegations, feelings toward the foster parents. There was no contact during that period of time. But in the fourth interview, where you get an entirely different story, they didn't do the right techniques to find out what caused the change in outcry.
And how does that affect the reliability of that interview?
I don't know what to make of it. And the fact I don't know says something's wrong. We should know. I mean, it could be any, I don't know what the answer is, but they could have found the answer, but they didn't do it because evidently they were not trained well enough.
Thank you, Dr. Powell.
Okay, Ms. Frost, continues.
Could tell me exactly what you reviewed prior to your testimony.
I reviewed a set of discovery materials, which were the 3 forensic interviews, the Child Advocacy Center, couple-page summary of interviews and the picture of the drawing, the the Southern Crescent sexual assault, child advocacy, 2 sets of medical notes, and 2, let's see, trying to figure out how many, several police reports. I think there are 3 Henry County police narratives, and the 4 interviews that involved anybody in this case. And I know the first one was not really relevant for this.
So you did watch the 4 interviews that involved Millie? Is that what you're...
Yes, I watched all 4.
And then you indicated you watched the summary, or you read the summary of the interviews?
Yes,
And the medical notes from Southern Crescent
that's correct.
and some police reports.
Yes.
So it'd be fair to say that you were unaware of the statements that Millie made at the hospital on the day of Levin's death.
I don't know what you're saying, so I don't know. Probably not.
Were you aware of any statements that Millie made at the hospital on the day Levin died, November 17th, 2015?
No, I don't think I have that in any of the materials.
So you weren't aware that the next day, even before the interview, she told a defects worker that the defendants whoop us with belts. You weren't aware of that?
Okay, that was an allegation in the 4th interview, but I was not aware it had been said before that.
And were you aware that on November 18, 2015, prior to the 4th interview, Millie had said to a defects worker that Jennifer kneed her in the stomach?
No, I'm not aware of that.
So you're not aware of any statements Millie made to any defects workers prior to her November 18th interview, is that correct?
That's correct.
So you wouldn't know if they were consistent with any other statement she made?
The only thing I can judge are the materials I looked at.
And you familiar with the study that it's actually better to interview a child 48 hours or 2 sleep cycles after a traumatic event?
No, I haven't seen that
You haven't
research.
seen that.
I'm a little surprised because in Europe, that would be illegal. You have to interview them within 24 hours of the initial outcry. The forensic interview has to be done or else it's not admissible in court in many of the European countries.
That's in Europe.
That's Europe, right. So that's why I'm saying I'm surprised because they're claiming they've got the higher scientific, status. But that would be interesting. I'd like to see the report. If you've got that reference, I'd like to have it.
So after, so let's see, talking about trauma, like physical abuse can be difficult for a child. Do you agree with that?
It is for any of us.
And that probably could be because of shame.
Not as likely, but could be.
And it could be
Because most 3-year-olds don't have shame about any touching, that unless they've been taught more. So I would,
So talking
but-
about trauma can also
yeah.
be difficult because of embarrassment.
could be, yeah.
Could also be difficult talking about trauma because you could fear a loved one would get in trouble or go to jail.
Right.
And it's not uncommon for victims of abuse to have conflicted feelings about their abusers.
Depends on whether the abuser is a stranger or somebody within the family.
So in the family, you would expect them to have conflicted feelings.
It's a lot more difficult there, and a good forensic interviewer is going to do some checking about feelings toward that family member before they get very far into the interview, because that can be important, and getting that clarified can help the rest of the forensic interview.
You talked a little bit about grooming with Ms. Small, wasn't it? And so I just want to talk to you about grooming. Do you see, is grooming when an abuser abuser would give a child a toy, something that they like.
Or treat them nicely, or speak nicely to them, or pay attention to them. It can be a whole series of things. And within the groomer, who is the pedophile, it becomes an escalating set of behaviors.
So they first treat the child well, groom is treating the child
Yes.
well initially, and then eventually.
Right.
Um,
But co-opting is an analogous situation, and that's something we try not to do. While developing rapport, we try not to co-opt the child, begin to get the child more deeply enmeshed with us as the interviewer.
Now, when a child does not want to just discuss the abuse that they either witnessed or personally experienced, it could just mean that the child doesn't want to relive the experience of it.
Sometimes that's the case.
And it could just be at that time that remembering it was too painful.
That's possible.
And it could just mean that at that time that they're just uncomfortable discussing the abuse.
That's possible.
But just because a child doesn't want to discuss the abuse doesn't mean they aren't abused.
Of course, that doesn't necessarily mean that. I generally find, I've never found a child that didn't want to go ahead when somebody was supportive and talk about it. But I know there are children who don't, and we've got to be sensitive to those as well, yes.
And you agree that disclosure of abuse is a process?
Sometimes. It's a process when there's more conflicted nature. This is one of the big issues of dispute among sexual abuse and physical abuse interviewers. How much does it take a period of time for a child to disclose, and how much is immediate? And the research is difficult because there are many people that never disclose. I had a 56-year-old woman disclose her sexual abuse for the first time to me in therapy in my office, 56 years old. So we don't know. We don't have good data. But the best data we have says it's where there's conflicted situations and a child's still in a potentially dangerous situation, it becomes more of a process of sort of testing the waters. Where a child feels safe or the abusive person is gone, generally it comes out all at once.
So, hypothetically, if a child was living with their abusers and 15 hours later was asked to discuss the abuse, not knowing where, the child not even knowing where they were going, who they were going to stay with, they might not discuss the abuse.
They might not. And again, a sensitive interviewer should have checked for that and talked about that.
And would you agree that you can have a near perfect forensic interview that follows all protocol and an abused child would not disclose abuse?
It's possible.
And you could agree that you can also have a less than stellar interview with leading questions and failure to follow protocol, and a child will truthfully disclose the abuse.
That happens at times. I've seen that.
You've seen that?
So, but you're better off doing a correct forensic interview and hoping you've got more trustworthy data.
And I would agree with you. You'd always want them to follow protocol, that would be best practice.
Yes.
And you talked a little bit about coaching. Would you agree that it's harder to coach a 4-year-old than an older child?
That's interesting. That's the first time anybody's ever asked me that. It's generally the opposite. Is it harder is it impossible to coach an older child?
No, not impossible.
Yeah, but but you're doing the opposite to me. Anybody, any age can be coached. As we get older, we have more of a mind of our own. Hopefully, we look at the ads on television as adults and we don't buy in, and we analyze whether that really is a good thing for us to purchase. A child, when they say eating this sugared cereal is the best thing for you, they're going to buy into it without questioning. But it depends on what the coaching is and how it's done. You can coach anybody, any age.
So in response to my question, do you believe it's harder to coach a 4-year-old than an older child? Do you agree with that? Or
No,
you don't agree with that?
I think you can coach people at any age And I think generally it's harder to coach an older child because they have more life experiences of their own. 4-year-olds don't have as many references and many life experiences, and I think it's easier to coach a younger child, and there's actually research data, and I can cite it if you want it, but
Are you familiar, well, do you remember back in, let me see, December 10 and 11 of 2008 testifying in the case of the state versus Renee Ingalls?
I don't remember that.
We're looking at a transcript of that assisting. So you don't remember ever saying that, so a 3-year-old is not as easy to coach as a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old?
Okay. What that was referring to is a different set of research. That's the research about lying. 3-year-olds are the earliest age you can lie, and therefore it's easier to coach the 4-year-old, 5-year-old, because the 3-year-old is just going to repeat what you say, but not necessarily to lie for it. They're just going to repeat it straight out. To get somebody actually to manipulate truth when they've got one set of things they've experienced and say another thing, that the 4-year-old or 5-year-old would be easier for that. To get them to parrot back, it would be pretty easy with a 3-year-old, but not to reason it and say it back. So that's what I was referring to as the lying research that Stephen Cece did.
And have you heard that according to Millie's family members, the lies that were told are in small things, like crushing her?
I don't have that in any of my data.
Wasn't something that you reviewed?
It was not in anything I reviewed.
Now, you talked a little bit about suggestibility.
Yes.
And there's a question about whether repeated questions can lead a child to falsehood or coercion. Is that correct?
Yes.
But isn't it true that actually the literature supports the fact that repeating questions do not actually increase the frequency of saying?
No.
No?
There's some literature that says quite the opposite. Poole and Lamb had some literature saying not to do that, and also Stephen Cece Maggie Burke had some literature saying not to do that.
So you're not familiar with the Mousetrap study from 1994?
No, I'm not familiar with that study,
You're not?
which sort of surprises me because some of this research was after that and said the opposite.
So you're not familiar that in fact the number of false reports in that case didn't always go up with more questioning? It actually went down. You weren't aware of that?
With repeated questioning?
Yes, sir.
No. I think that there's some there's contradictory research and there are contradictory studies to that.
And are you familiar with the Sandstone study?
No.
You're not familiar with what study you did?
There are thousands of studies. What I'm citing are the best done studies, the one the American Psychological Association backs with their child abuse approach and their people.
So are you familiar with the study that involved the clown study? Remember that study? The clown study?
Yes,
Okay.
that was Stephen Cece.
So in that case, you agree they had about 4 to 7-year-olds go into a room where there was a clown. The
Right,
clown.
right.
One kid interacted with the clown.
Mm-hmm.
The other one watched.
Right,
And then they were later asked misleading questions. to
Right.
children, right? Is that kind of how you remember that study
yes.
going?
Mm-hmm.
And then the results of that were that 0 children who actually interacted with the clown made false reports, correct?
And I think that may have been correct.
And that only 1 child who had watched made a false report out of all those children.
As I remember, it's been years since I've read that study. Yeah.
And those kids were asked very leading and suggestible questions. Would you agree with that?
Yes, but this is one of the head of the person who did that research is the one who says you don't do suggestive questioning and cautions against it, and is one of the leading people in doing clean clinical interviewing.
Is that Cynthia McNeill are you talking about?
What?
Cynthia McNeill?
Yeah,
Okay.
right. It's Burke.
So you're,
It's Maggie Burke and Stephen Cece.
okay, so you're aware that they've stated that after reviewing suggestibility research, they concluded there is no serious doubt that directed questioning will often be far more effective than requests for free recall in securing disclosures of abuse.
That may have been an earlier article they did. I think they've later changed that.
So you would agree that a forensic interview is a tool that can be used by detectives to assist our investigation?
Yes.
It's not the only thing you look at when.
Oh, no.
Okay. And so you want to see as someone who's coming into court as an expert in forensic psychology and expert as yours, you want to look at the whole case.
As much as we are allowed to testify to.
Right.
We have to stay within the areas of our own licensure.
Right, understood. So you would want to know all the statements the child made and in what circumstances.
As much as we can, yes.
And you would want to know if there was corroborating evidence to support what the child said. That would be important.
That certainly is important.
And you would want to review that prior to coming in court and giving your expert opinion.
Yes.
So, on November 18, 2015, you reviewed that forensic interview.
Okay.
Millie states, when she gets hurt, Daddy puts cream on her bruises, but not Mom. And it smells like old people. And it makes it hot and cold. Remember
Yes.
that statement?
Yes.
Well, as part of your review of the case before coming into court, were you aware that when pictures were taken of the defendant's home, they found icy hot cream next to the bedstand, consistent with that statement?
I wasn't aware they found it, but I'm not surprised, yes.
Are you surprised?
No, I said I'm not surprised.
So that would corroborate Millie's testimony.
Right.
And were you aware that on November 18th, Millie disclosed that she was whipped by a belt?
Okay.
That was to a defect case worker.
Okay, I believe this was the interview in which you said that, yes.
On November 18th.
As much as I can remember, I have to read my own writing, and it's not always easy to get to this.
So were you aware that that statement was actually corroborated by the medical evidence?
No, I was not.
And were you aware that one of the statements Millie had made was that she was telling people that her sister's organs were split in two? Were you aware she ever made that statement?
That she was what?
That her sister who's deceased, her organs were split in two, that's how she died.
Yeah.
Were you aware Millie made that statement?
The belt, I think, was the next interview, not this one. But I do recall in one of the interviews that she said something to that effect, that she had died, yes.
But were you aware that Millie had stated Layla's organs were split in two and she got that information from Peggy Banks? Were you aware of that?
No.
So you weren't aware that, based on the medical evidence, that is in fact what occurred? Layla's organs were split.
I wasn't aware of that.
So that corroborates Millie's
made after she does her questioning, these statements made by the attorney, but it doesn't corroborate the statement. The fact that Peggy Banks told her something does not corroborate anything. It's Peggy Banks' statement.
Your Honor, I was asking about that statement that you made is corroborated by the physical evidence of those these experts. You can ask him about what he knows, what he's reviewed. He testified that corroboration is an important piece of the
So, the questions,
I can read on.
question is, what is corroborated in this case? And so, you said to move on.
Were you aware that, during the forensic interviews, Millie stated that she did go to daycare? That was what happened, she said in the interviews.
She says she did not go to daycare, yes.
And in Millie's statements, I believe she stated that Jennifer, I think we testified to this earlier, Jennifer twisted her left arm.
Yes,
And were you aware that there was evidence that?
that was in the fourth interview, yes.
And were you well aware that Millie's left arm was broken and had bruises on it?
Yes,
You're aware of that?
yes. I think there's argument as to the cause, but yes.
And were you aware that Millie told two people, once November 17th and once November 18th, that Layla died before the ambulance got there?
I have not read that in
You
anything.
haven't seen that?
I have not seen that.
You don't remember hearing that in the November 18th interview, forensic interview?
That she was dead before the ambulance got there, no.
You don't recall that. So were you aware that on November 18th, Millie told someone that Jennifer kneed her in the stomach or her sister in the stomach?
I believe that was the fourth interview, not the 18th.
But you don't have the information as to what Millie said while at the hospital on November 17th.
No.
So you don't know what she said there.
And the material I have that was said in the fourth interview, which was later,
Okay. So you would agree that what she said in the fourth statement could be consistent with what she said the day of Layla's death? You just don't know because you didn't have an opportunity to review that.
no, I have not seen anything that would make that consistent.
And if you had an opportunity to review all the prior statements Millie made on November 17th and November 18th, could that change your opinion in this case?
I try to be objective, so obviously it could, depending on the veracity of the reports.
Thank you for that question.
Thank you, Ms. Andrews. Ms. Paul.
So if those folks were saying that Millie said things, and in fact that wasn't true, that would completely destroy the hypothesis that Ms. Andrews presented.
If the grandparents were saying that, and those are the people she'd been talking to, then that would be a different source, and that would be something different.
So if her great-grandparents or her mother told her that the child died before she got to the hospital, that doesn't corroborate anything that Millie said. That corroborates what somebody else said.
That would be accurate.
And a 4-year-old doctor, to what extent is it credible that a 4-year-old would know if a child died before the ambulance got there?
I believe that goes to the ultimate issue.
And he's an expert in
I'm
neurology and go.
One second, please don't talk over each other. Ms. Andrews was going first.
I'm going to check if that goes to the ultimate issue. The council is asking this doctor about credibility.
The issue with the rules allow experts to testify as to the issue.
Let's have the jury step up, please. Okay, it's 3:30. Let's go ahead and take our break, and I'd like to see a case law that you have. Can I come back? Thank you.